Imagine waking up on a warm July morning in 1947. You grab your coffee, you unfold the newspaper, and there it is, a headline that just stops your heart. RAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. Could it be true? Had we finally made contact? For a few brief, electrifying hours, the world held its breath. The story seemed to confirm what people were already whispering about. Strange lights in the sky, unidentified flying objects. It was a moment when science fiction suddenly felt like hard reality. The idea that we were not alone in this vast universe was no longer just a fantasy. It was front-page news. The story spread like wildfire across the country and then the world. On radio broadcasts and in coffee shops, the only topic of conversation was the flying disc found in New Mexico. What did it look like? Who was flying it? Were they friendly? The questions were endless, and the excitement was honestly contagious. This wasn't just another tall tale from the desert. This was an official announcement from the United States Army Air Forces. For a moment, humanity seemed to be on the brink of a new era. An age where our place in the cosmos would be redefined forever. It was a time of pure possibility. This single headline changed everything. Before this, stories of flying saucers were often dismissed. They were seen as misidentifications or hoaxes. But now the military itself was using the term. They were admitting to having the object in their possession. This gave the phenomenon an unprecedented level of credibility. It validated the experiences of countless eyewitnesses who had been ridiculed for what they saw. The Roswell Daily Record newspaper had perhaps unknowingly fired the starting pistol on the biggest mystery of the 20th century, a mystery that we are still trying to solve today. Think about the implications. If the government had captured a craft from another world, what would that mean for our technology, our religions, our very understanding of existence? The possibilities are staggering. It suggests that extraterrestrial beings have not only visited our planet, but that they have been doing so with technology far beyond our own. The initial report from Roswell wasn't just a story about strange debris. It was a story about a potential paradigm shift for all of humankind, a shift that was seemingly confirmed and then, just as quickly, denied. But why? The story begins not with generals or scientists, but with a humble rancher. His name was William Brazel. In mid-June 1947, after a powerful thunderstorm, Brazel was riding his horse across the vast, empty landscape of his ranch, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell. He wasn't looking for anything out of the ordinary. He was just checking on his sheep. But then he saw it. The field was littered with a type of debris he had never seen before. It was spread over an area several hundred yards long. It was not from any plane or balloon he knew of. This was something different. Brazel described the material as truly bizarre. He found pieces of a thin, foil-like substance. When he crumpled it in his hand, it would immediately unfold itself, leaving no creases behind. It was like a metal with a memory. He also found small beams, or I-beams, with strange symbols on them. He described them as a kind of purplish-pink hieroglyphic. These were not English letters, they were not Russian, they were not any known language on Earth. What could they be? Could they be the language of an extraterrestrial civilization? The rancher was puzzled and honestly, pretty intrigued by his strange find. Along with the memory metal and the inscribed beams, there were pieces of a tough plastic-like material and thread-like substances. None of it would burn. It was all incredibly lightweight but also incredibly strong. Brazel, a man who knew the materials of his world, could not identify any of it. He gathered some of the debris and stored it in a shed. For a few weeks he didn't think much of it, but then he heard the growing stories about flying discs being seen all over the country. He started to wonder if the strange junk he found could be connected. He decided it was his duty to tell someone. On July 7th, Brazel drove into Roswell and went straight to Sheriff George Wilcox. He showed the sheriff some of the pieces he had found. The sheriff was so impressed and concerned that he immediately called the nearby Roswell Army Airfield, home of the 509th Bomb Group, the only atomic bomb squadron in the world. This was not a small local airbase. This was one of the most secure and important military installations on the planet. The moment that call was made, the story of a rancher's strange discovery was transformed into a matter of national security, and the mystery deepened. When the call from Sheriff Wilcox came in, the base commander dispatched his top intelligence officer, Major Jesse Marcel. Marcel, along with a counterintelligence corps officer, drove out to the ranch with Mac Brazel to see the debris field for themselves. What Marcel saw that day would haunt him for the rest of his life. He later said the debris was scattered over an area 3/4 of a mile long and several hundred feet wide. He confirmed Brazel's account of the materials. It was nothing like anything he had ever seen in his military career, and he had seen everything. Major Marcel was a highly respected officer. He had been decorated for his service in World War II. He was not a man prone to fantasy or exaggeration. He described handling the foil-like material that was as thin as a candy bar wrapper but could not be dented with a sledgehammer. He saw the I-beams with the strange, unearthly symbols. In interviews years later, Marcel was adamant. It was not anything from this earth, he stated repeatedly. He was convinced that what he had collected was the wreckage of a craft that did not originate on our planet. This was the expert opinion of the man sent to investigate. After collecting a significant amount of the material, Marcel and his team returned to the base. On the way, Marcel even stopped at his home to show the strange debris to his wife and young son. His son, Jesse Marcel Jr., would later become a doctor and a flight surgeon, and he would corroborate his father's story for the rest of his life. He remembered holding the strange materials in his hands as a boy, seeing the alien-like symbols on the beams. The personal testimony of the Marcel family adds a powerful, human element to the story. It wasn't just a military report. It was a life-changing event for them. Back at the Roswell Army Airfield, the base commander, Colonel William Blanchard, examined the wreckage. He was apparently so convinced of its otherworldly origin that he ordered his public information officer, Lieutenant Walter Haut, to issue a press release. This was a critical decision. The commander of the world's only atomic-equipped bomb group was about to tell the world that they had recovered a flying saucer. This was not a decision made lightly. It was based on the physical evidence and the assessment of his top intelligence officer. The wheels were in motion for a world-changing announcement. On the afternoon of July 8, 1947, Lieutenant Walter Haut typed up the press release and handed it to the local radio stations and newspapers. The message was clear, direct, and utterly sensational. It began. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality. Yesterday, when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County. It was official. The military had captured a flying disc. The news exploded. The story was immediately picked up by the Associated Press and sent out on the wire to newspapers across the globe. For a brief moment in history, the official position of a major branch of the U.S. military was that they had a UFO in their possession. Imagine the scene at the Roswell base. Phones must have been ringing off the hook. The world's media was descending on this quiet New Mexico town. The officers at the base had a world-changing secret on their hands. Colonel Blanchard had ordered the wreckage to be flown immediately to his superior, General Roger Ramey, at Fort Worth Army Airfield in Texas. This press release is one of the most important documents in the history of the UFO phenomenon. Why? Because it came from an official source. This wasn't a civilian witness or a local newspaper speculating. This was the 509th Bomb Group. These were the men entrusted with the most powerful weapons on Earth. Their credibility was, at the time, unquestionable. If they said they had a flying disc, people believed them. The statement was not ambiguous. It used the words flying disc and confirmed it was a reality. It was a bombshell announcement that promised to usher in a new age. But what happened next is where the story takes a sharp and mysterious turn. As Major Marcel flew the debris to Fort Worth to show General Ramey, a new plan was being put into motion. The excitement and transparency of the initial announcement were about to be replaced by a story that, honestly, many would find hard to believe. The phone lines between Fort Worth, Roswell, and Washington, D.C. must have been burning up. A decision was made at a very high level to shut the story down. The most incredible news in human history was about to be officially and completely retracted. When Major Jesse Marcel arrived at General Ramey's office in Fort Worth, something just didn't add up. The strange otherworldly debris he had so carefully packed and transported was, well, gone. In its place, spread out on the floor for the press to photograph, was the wreckage of a common weather balloon with a radar reflector. General Ramey told the reporters that the entire incident was just a mistake. He explained that the men at Roswell had simply misidentified a weather tracking device. The so-called flying disc was, according to him, nothing more than a balloon. The case, he declared, was closed. The newspapers were forced to print an embarrassing retraction. The headline now read, "General Ramey empties Roswell saucer," explaining away the exciting news from the previous day. The military even posed Major Marcel for photographs, making him kneel beside the flimsy balloon wreckage. If you look at those photos today, Marcel looks uncomfortable, almost, humiliated. He's pointing at material that he knew was not what he had found. Years later, he would say that the material in the photos was a substitute, a fake. He was ordered to go along with the cover story, and, as a good soldier, he obeyed. The official explanation was that the object was a Rowan sonde, a type of high-altitude weather balloon used to gather atmospheric data. These balloons were made of neoprene rubber, and had a kite-like radar target made of foil paper and balsa wood sticks. This is what the public was shown. But does this explanation really make sense? Would an experienced intelligence officer like Major Marcel, who had handled wreckage from enemy aircraft during the war, mistake a simple weather balloon for something from another world? Would the entire staff of the 509th Bomb Group make such a basic error? It seems, honestly, highly unlikely. The switch in the story was just too fast, too convenient. One day the military announces it has a flying disc. The next day, it's just a balloon. This sudden reversal is, for many, the single biggest piece of evidence that a cover-up took place. If it was just a balloon, why the initial panic? Why the sensational press release? Why fly the material under armed guard to a higher headquarters? The official story seemed to create more questions than it answered. The military wanted the world to forget about Roswell, but their clumsy handling of the situation only ensured that it would become a legend. Even as the military pushed the weather balloon story, the original witnesses knew it just wasn't true. Major Marcel, though silenced for decades by his military oath, eventually began to speak out in the late 1970s. He insisted that the material he recovered was extraterrestrial. His son, Jesse Marcel Jr., supported his father's claims, remembering the strange properties of the debris he held as a child. The sheriff's daughters also recalled their father being deeply shaken by the event, and the intimidation he received from the military to remain silent. These first-hand accounts paint a picture of a massive and successful cover-up operation. But the whispers went far beyond just strange materials. Rumors began to circulate about a second crash site closer to the town of Roswell. This is where, according to some accounts, the main body of the craft impacted, not just the debris field Mac Brazel found. And with this second site came the most shocking rumor of all, the recovery of non-human bodies. Glenn Dennis, a young mortician working in Roswell in 1947, came forward years later with a startling story. He claimed he received a call from the base, asking about the availability of child-sized coffins, and how to preserve bodies that had been exposed to the elements. Dennis also claimed to have spoken with a nurse at the base hospital, who was distraught after participating in a preliminary autopsy of several small non-human bodies. She described them as having large heads and big eyes. According to Dennis, this nurse was quickly transferred away, and he never heard from her again. Her identity has never been conclusively proven, but her story, as told by Dennis, became a central part of the Roswell legend. It took the story from a crashed hardware incident to one involving deceased extraterrestrial pilots. This is the core of the controversy. These stories of alien bodies, secret autopsies, and a second crash site have been fiercely debated. Skeptics point out that many of these accounts only emerged decades after the event and lack hard evidence. However, proponents argue that the witnesses were afraid to speak out for years due to military threats and ridicule. They believe that the bodies were quickly flown from Roswell to a more secure location, possibly Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, a place long rumored to house UFO secrets. These rumors, whether true or not, have fueled the public's fascination and suspicion that the government is hiding the most profound secret in human history. For nearly 50 years, the weather balloon story remained the official, if widely doubted, explanation. But in the 1990s, due to public pressure and congressional inquiries, the U.S. Air Force decided to revisit the Roswell case. They released two new reports. The first, in 1994, changed the story again. It was no longer a standard weather balloon. Instead, the Air Force claimed the wreckage was from a top-secret program called Project Mogul. This was a project that used high-altitude balloons to listen for sound waves from Soviet atomic bomb tests. This, they said, explained the unusual materials. Project Mogul balloons did use materials that were uncommon at the time, including polyethylene plastics and radar reflectors with metallic foil and balsa wood. The Air Force argued that a rancher like Mac Brazel would not have recognized these materials, and that even military personnel at a remote base like Roswell might have been unfamiliar with this top-secret project. This new explanation seemed more plausible than the simple weather balloon story. It accounted for the military's secrecy and the strange-looking debris. But did it account for everything? Many researchers and witnesses said no. The Project Mogul explanation still did not satisfy many people. For one, it did not explain the hieroglyphic symbols that Major Marcel and others described. The radar targets for Mogul balloons had tape on them, but it was just regular reinforcement tape, not something covered in an unknown language. More importantly, it did not explain the memory metal properties of the foil that would smooth itself out. And what about the rumors of bodies? The Second Air Force report, released in 1997, addressed this by suggesting that people were confusing separate events. They claimed the alien body stories were distorted memories of rescue operations involving injured airmen or even crash test dummies. This explanation, that witnesses had confused memories of crash test dummies dropped from the sky in the 1950s with an event in 1947, was met with widespread ridicule. It seemed to many to be an insult to the intelligence of the original witnesses. How could someone mistake a dummy drop in 1953 for a crash saucer with alien bodies in 1947? To believers in the UFO story, these evolving and sometimes clumsy official explanations were simply more proof of a cover-up. Each new story seemed designed to muddy the waters further, to create confusion, and to move the truth further out of reach. So, what really happened in the New Mexico desert in 1947? Was it a crashed extraterrestrial vehicle with alien occupants? Was it a top-secret spy balloon from Project Mogul? Or was it just a simple weather balloon, misidentified by an entire chain of command? Nearly 80 years later, the debate rages on. The Roswell incident has become more than just a historical event. It is a modern myth and a cultural touchstone. It represents the ultimate clash between official secrecy and public curiosity. It is the dividing line between belief and skepticism. The impact of Roswell on popular culture is undeniable. It has inspired countless books, documentaries, television shows like The X-Files and blockbuster movies. The image of the Roswell gray alien with its large head, slender body, and big black eyes has become the universal symbol for an extraterrestrial visitor. The town of Roswell itself has embraced its unique fame, hosting an annual UFO festival that attracts thousands of believers, researchers, and curious tourists from around the world. The incident has transformed a small desert town into the unofficial capital of ufology. It has become a permanent fixture in our collective imagination. The reason the Roswell mystery endures is because it touches on some of our deepest questions. Are we alone in the universe? Can we trust our governments to tell us the truth? The story persists because the official explanations have been inconsistent and, to many, unconvincing. The testimony of the original witnesses, men like Jesse Marcel, remains powerful and difficult to dismiss. They were credible people who stood by their stories until their dying day, even when it brought them ridicule. Their conviction suggests they saw something truly extraordinary. In the end, you must decide for yourself. Do you believe the official story of Project Mogul? Or do you believe the first-hand accounts of eyewitnesses who claimed they saw and touched the wreckage of something not of this earth? Perhaps the truth is somewhere in between, a story more complex than any single theory can explain. The physical evidence is long gone, locked away or destroyed. All we have are the stories, the documents, and the enduring questions. What was the material that could not be dented or creased? What were the strange symbols? And what did the military take from that desert ranch under the cover of darkness? The search for answers continues,